Look at me for a second. If your chest just tightened when you read this title, your intuition is already whispering something you've been trying to silence. I'm not here to scare you. I'm here to tell you the truth your nervous system already knows. Before we go any further, subscribe to this channel and like this video, because what I'm about to share protects men who are willing to see clearly instead of hoping blindly. When a woman is about to cheat, it rarely starts in the bedroom. It starts in her emotional posture toward you. The first red flag is a subtle but persistent emotional distancing. She's still present, still polite, still functioning, but the warmth has cooled, conversations shorten, curiosity about your inner world fades. You feel like you're talking to someone who's already halfway out the room. This isn't moodiness, this is disengagement. And disengagement is the soil where betrayal grows. As a psychologist, I want you to understand this without panic. Women don't usually detach suddenly. They detach in layers. She stops sharing small details first. Then she stops seeking your reassurance. Then she stops being affected by your approval or disapproval. When you notice that your presence no longer shifts her emotional state, pay attention. Indifference is louder than anger. You may also sense a strange role reversal. She becomes more guarded while accusing you of being distant. This projection is unconscious. Her mind is rehearsing justification. To cheat, a person must first feel internally justified. And that justification often begins by reframing you as emotionally unavailable, even if your behavior hasn't changed. What makes this phase dangerous is how reasonable it looks from the outside. There's no obvious villain, no dramatic fights, just a quiet erosion of connection. Men often misread this as stability or maturity. It's neither. It's emotional exit preparation. I'm not telling you this to make you suspicious. I'm telling you so you stop gaslighting yourself. Your discomfort is data. Your confusion is a signal. Healthy relationships feel responsive, not hollow. When connection thins without explanation, something is being withdrawn. Stay with me. Awareness is not weakness. It's how self-respecting men protect their future. If you ignore these early shifts, you risk learning the truth later through pain instead of insight. And that lesson always costs more than attention ever would. For men who delay listening to themselves right now today, the second red flag shows up in her boundaries, and it's one men often miss because it disguises itself as independence. Suddenly, her privacy intensifies. Her phone angles away from you. Notifications go silent. Passwords change, not dramatically, but decisively. When you enter the room, screens dim. And if you ask about it, you're met with irritation, not reassurance. This isn't about needing space. This is about protecting a developing emotional bubble you are no longer allowed inside. Understand this clearly. Healthy privacy feels calm. Suspicious secrecy feels tense. Your body knows the difference even when your mind tries to rationalize it away. When someone has nothing to hide, their boundaries don't come with defensiveness. When someone is hiding something, even something that hasn't fully happened yet, their nervous system becomes alert. You feel it in the air. Conversations feel monitored. Jokes land flat. You sense you're being observed instead of engaged with. Here's the psychological truth most men aren't taught. Before cheating becomes physical, it becomes cognitive. She begins to imagine a version of herself that is not accountable to you. That imagined freedom requires secrecy, so she starts practicing it in small ways, deleting messages, taking longer routes home, creating explanations before questions are even asked. If you confront this too early, she may accuse you of control. This is not because you are controlling, but because guilt distorts perception. The mind protects itself by reframing threat. You become the threat, not her behavior. That's why calm observation is more powerful than emotional interrogation. Watch patterns, not excuses. Another subtle sign appears in how she narrates her day. Stories become vague, names disappear, details blur. Not because she forgot, but because specificity risks exposure. When emotional energy is invested elsewhere, transparency becomes risky. Men often feel ashamed for noticing this. They worry it makes them insecure. Let me be direct with you. Self-trust is not insecurity, it's discernment. Insecurity seeks control. Discernment seeks truth. This stage is where many men overcorrect. They become nicer, quieter, more accommodating, hoping to restore closeness. But attraction does not grow in silence or self-erasure. When you shrink yourself to avoid loss, you accelerate it. I want you grounded here. You don't need proof, you need clarity. A relationship that requires you to ignore your instincts to maintain peace is already teaching you to betray yourself, and self-betrayal always comes before being betrayed by someone else. Notice how your body feels around her now compared to before. Your body does not lie. It reacts to patterns long before your mind catches up. That awareness is not paranoia, it's perception sharpening, and it's meant to protect you if you're willing to listen without fear today. The third red flag emerges in her language, and it's one of the most psychologically revealing shifts of all. She begins to rewrite the history of your relationship in real time. Moments that were once warm are now described as stressful. Efforts you made are minimized or forgotten. Conflicts are remembered with sharper edges, always tilted in a way that positions her as constrained and you as limiting. This isn't memory failure, it's narrative preparation. Before a person violates their own values, they must adjust the story they tell themselves. Cheating doesn't begin with desire. It begins with justification, and justification requires a villain. If she can subtly recast you as emotionally unavailable, controlling, or uninspiring, her internal resistance weakens. This is how good people do things that violate who they believe they are. You may notice she brings up old issues that were supposedly resolved, not to heal them, but to reopen emotional distance. Each reopened wound creates psychological space between you. And in that space, comparison begins. Someone else doesn't have to be perfect. They just have to exist without shared history. Novelty feels lighter than accountability. Another shift appears in how she speaks about men in general. Casual comments about how emotionally aware other men are, how some men really listen. These aren't compliments aimed at you, they're subconscious contrasts. She may not even realize she's doing it, but her attention is already splitting. What hurts most for men is that this phase often includes an increase in criticism paired with a decrease in intimacy. You're corrected more, teased more sharply, touched less. This combination destabilizes your confidence. And when confidence dips, men often chase reassurance, which unfortunately confirms the internal story she's constructing about you being needy or unsatisfying. I need you steady here. Do not argue with a rewritten past. Arguing gives it energy. Instead, observe the pattern. When someone suddenly needs the relationship to have always been flawed, it's because they need permission to step outside of it. This red flag is emotionally exhausting because it makes you question your reality. That's not accidental. Cognitive dissonance is uncomfortable, and the mind seeks relief. She seeks relief by changing the story. You seek relief by doubting yourself. Only one of those paths protects your dignity. The goal is not to accuse, it's to regain internal alignment. You can say, calmly and without defensiveness, that the relationship you remember doesn't match the one being described. Her response will tell you more than any explanation ever could. When truth is no longer shared, intimacy can't survive. And when intimacy fades, behavior follows. Recognizing this early is not pessimism, it's psychological literacy. Men who understand this stop begging for clarity and start demanding self-respect. That shift alone changes outcomes, regardless of what she chooses to do next in your life or outside of it soon. The fourth red flag reveals itself through a sudden shift in how she regulates attention and validation. She becomes more externally focused. Her energy lifts when she's not with you and dulls when she is. She puts more effort into how she looks for places you're not attending. Social media activity increases or changes tone. Photos feel more curated, captions more suggestive, engagement more intentional. This isn't about self-care. It's about signaling availability without saying it out loud. From a psychological standpoint, attention is currency. Where someone spends it tells you what they value and what they're cultivating. When a woman is emotionally anchored in a relationship, her primary validation loop is internal and relational. When she's preparing to step outside of it, that loop shifts outward. She begins collecting reactions, compliments, and micro-connections that make her feel seen without accountability. You might notice she becomes oddly energized after being out, but emotionally unavailable afterward. That's a nervous system contrast. Dopamine from novelty followed by emotional withdrawal from familiarity. It's not malicious, it's chemical, but chemistry still has consequences. Another subtle sign appears in how she reacts to your presence in public spaces. She may seem distant, distracted, or unusually independent. Less physical closeness, less unconscious touch, almost as if she's rehearsing emotional separation, while still technically together. This rehearsal lowers internal resistance to crossing lines later. Men often misinterpret this phase and respond by competing. They try to impress, perform, or regain attention through effort. But attraction doesn't respond to performance under pressure. It responds to grounded presence. When you chase attention, you signal scarcity. Scarcity erodes polarity. There may also be an increase in comparisons, even if indirect. She mentions how exciting certain environments feel, how alive she feels doing things without you. Not as an invitation, but as a declaration. The subtext is distance. And distance, once normalized, makes betrayal feel less like a rupture and more like a continuation. Here's what matters most. If her sense of aliveness no longer includes you, that's not something you fix by working harder. That's something you address by standing firmer. You don't shame, you don't interrogate, you don't beg, you notice. Healthy relationships expand both people. They don't require one person to shrink to keep the other interested. When a woman needs external attention to feel alive, it signals an internal disconnection that no amount of reassurance from you can repair. Your job here is not to police her behavior. It's to observe how you feel in the relationship now. If you feel like an option instead of a priority, that feeling deserves respect, not reaction. Respect. Men who maintain self-respect during this phase either restore balance or gain clarity. Both outcomes protect you. Ignoring this red flag doesn't preserve love. It only delays truth, and truth delayed always arrives louder and more painful than when it's faced early with calm strength. The fifth red flag is one of the most quietly destructive because it feels like emotional whiplash. Her warmth becomes inconsistent. Some days she's affectionate, engaged, almost like the woman you fell for. Other days she's distant, irritable, or unreachable. This hot and cold pattern isn't confusion, it's emotional splitting. Part of her is still attached to you, another part is leaning elsewhere, and the tension between those parts shows up as unpredictability. Psychologically, this happens when attachment and desire stop pointing in the same direction. Attachment keeps her connected to the safety you represent. Desire pulls her toward novelty, validation, or escape. When those forces collide, inconsistency is the result. You feel like you're walking on emotional shifting sand, never sure which version of her you'll meet. That instability isn't accidental. It's the external expression of an internal conflict she hasn't resolved. This is where many men become hyper-focused on getting back to the good version of her. They analyze what they did differently on the warm days. They adjust behavior, tone, effort. But inconsistency is not feedback. It's fragmentation. You cannot stabilize someone who is divided within themselves. Another sign in this phase is how she responds to your emotional needs. When you express concern, she may briefly reassure you, then quickly withdraw again. Or she may accuse you of overthinking right after moments of closeness. This push-pull keeps you emotionally invested while slowly eroding your sense of security. Intermittent reinforcement is one of the strongest bonding mechanisms in human psychology. It creates attachment through uncertainty. Casinos use it for a reason. What's dangerous here is how easy it is to blame yourself. You start believing that if you just say the right thing, stay calm enough, or show enough patience, the closeness will stabilize. But closeness cannot be stabilized from one side. A relationship cannot be regulated by one nervous system doing all the work. Notice how this pattern affects you. Your mood starts depending on hers. Your sense of peace becomes conditional. You wait for signals. That waiting is costly. It drains clarity and replaces it with hope mixed with anxiety. That emotional cocktail is addictive, and it keeps men stuck longer than betrayal itself. I want you grounded in this truth. Consistency is not too much to ask. It's the minimum requirement for emotional safety. When affection becomes unpredictable, it's not romantic tension, it's instability. You don't confront inconsistency with intensity. You confront it with steadiness. You name what you experience without accusation, and then you watch. Someone who values the bond will move toward clarity. Someone preparing to step outside of it will move toward defensiveness or further distance. Your power here is not in fixing the pattern. It's in refusing to normalize it. Men who stop accepting emotional volatility either restore mutual respect or reclaim themselves before deeper damage occurs. Both outcomes are wins, even if they don't feel like it at first. The sixth red flag shows up when accountability disappears and empathy thins. You express something that hurts you, and instead of curiosity, you're met with irritation, dismissal, or fatigue. She seems overwhelmed by your feelings, even when you're calm. This isn't emotional burnout, it's emotional withdrawal. When someone is mentally preparing to cross a line, empathy becomes inconvenient. From a psychological perspective, empathy creates bonds, and bonds create responsibility. To reduce the discomfort of potential betrayal, the mind unconsciously dulls empathy. This makes distancing feel justified instead of cruel. You're no longer experienced as a partner, but as a pressure. And pressure, in her internal narrative, becomes something to escape. You may notice she becomes unusually self-focused. Conversations circle back to her stress, her growth, her need for space. Your inner world becomes secondary. When you share concerns, she frames them as demands. When you ask for reassurance, she frames it as control. This reframing protects her autonomy at the expense of connection. Another subtle shift appears in conflict resolution. Problems stop being worked through and start being avoided. She delays conversations, changes the subject, promises to talk later, and never does. Avoidance is not peacekeeping, it's emotional exit behavior. When someone plans to stay, they repair. When they plan to leave or cheat, they stall. This is also the stage where moral language changes. She may talk about finding herself, needing freedom, or not wanting to feel guilty for wanting more. These phrases sound healthy, but in context, they often signal permission-seeking, not from you, but from herself. Personal growth becomes the mask that hides relational avoidance. Men often respond here by over-explaining their feelings, hoping clarity will restore empathy. But empathy cannot be negotiated. It's either present or it's not. When your pain becomes an inconvenience, the emotional contract has already been weakened. Pay attention to how safe you feel being honest now. If you censor yourself to avoid her irritation, that's not maturity, that's self-abandonment. A relationship that requires silence to survive is already collapsing internally. This red flag matters because cheating doesn't require cruelty. It requires disconnection. When empathy fades, lines blur. What once felt unthinkable starts feeling justified. That shift happens quietly, long before any confession ever does. Your response here is not to harden or lash out. It's to observe without minimizing yourself. Emotional reciprocity is non-negotiable. Men who maintain that standard don't need to chase loyalty. They either inspire it or step away before betrayal defines the story. Clarity at this stage may hurt, but confusion hurts longer. Respect yourself enough to notice when your emotional presence is no longer welcomed. That awareness is strength, not loss.